Marilyn Monroe didn't die the way the world thinks. For decades, her story has been wrapped in mystery, scandal, and rumor. But in her final weeks, the woman known as the world's biggest star wasn't just battling fame, heartbreak, or the Hollywood machine. She was holding on to something far more personal, a truth that only those closest to her ever really knew. And in the end, it wasn't the cameras, the money, or even the men in her life that mattered most. It was something deeply human. This is the untold truth of Marilyn Monroe's final days.
The woman behind the image.
Marilyn Monroe. The very name is Hollywood. Her face is on posters, her voice echoes in songs, and her style shaped what glamour meant for an entire century. But here's the part many fans forget. Before there was Marilyn, there was Norma Jean. And Norma's story looked nothing like the bright lights of Los Angeles. She was born in 1926 in Los Angeles County Hospital to a single mother named Gladys. Her father? No one knew for sure. Some said it was a co-worker of her mother. Others whispered about a Hollywood connection. But Norma Jean never had an answer. She grew up without a dad and with a mother who battled serious mental illness. By the time Norma was a toddler, she was already being shuffled between foster homes. One of her earliest memories wasn't of dolls or playgrounds. It was of being told she had to move again, to another family, to another house where she didn't belong. Norma learned something very early. If you smile, people treat you better. That smile would one day hypnotize the world. But back then, it was just a little girl trying to survive. By age 16, her life was so unstable that the only way to avoid going back into the orphanage system was marriage. She married a neighbor's son, James Dougherty, and suddenly, at 16 years old, Norma Jean was a wife. It wasn't love. It was survival. While her husband served overseas during World War II, Norma worked in a defense factory, spraying airplane parts with fire-retardant paint. She looked like millions of other American women at the time. Hair tied up, face smeared with grease, working long hours to support the war. But then, something happened that would change everything. A photographer from the army spotted her in the factory. He thought she had a look. He took her picture, and just like that, Norma Jean's life swerved into a new direction. That factory photo was her ticket out. The world didn't see Norma anymore. They saw a girl who could be on magazine covers. And soon enough, she was. But here's the hidden truth. Even as she smiled for pin-up calendars, she was already being shaped into someone she wasn't. Her modeling agency told her to bleach her hair blonde, to change her name, to become an invention. She went along with it, because Norma Jean had learned long ago that survival meant pleasing people. And that's how Norma Jean became Marilyn Monroe, the biggest name in Hollywood history.
The rise no one expected.
Wow!
By 1946, Norma Jean was gone. The studios erased her, and in her place they created Marilyn Monroe. A name chosen because Monroe sounded American, solid, trustworthy, while Marilyn had a shine to it, like starlight. But here's what most fans don't know. In the beginning, Hollywood didn't believe in her. They thought she was just another pretty blonde. Disposable. Replaceable. She was given small roles, sometimes not even credited. She was told she was too shy, too insecure, too much like a model, and not enough like an actress. But Marilyn was stubborn. She studied the greats. She spent hours at the actor's studio, learning method acting, reading plays, memorizing lines. She refused to just be a decoration on screen. And slowly, she began to stand out. Even in tiny roles, she had something no one could ignore. A spark. A glow. A kind of vulnerability that made audiences look twice. By the early 1950s, her persistence was paying off. She landed bigger roles. Niagara in 1953, a thriller where her beauty was dangerous and magnetic. Then came Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. That film didn't just make her famous. It made her an icon. Her song, Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, was more than a musical number. It was a declaration. The world now belonged to Marilyn Monroe. Crowds followed her everywhere. Men worshipped her. Women copied her style. She was no longer just a starlet. She was the very definition of glamour. But here's the irony. The more famous Marilyn became, the lonelier Norma Jean felt. Because everyone wanted Marilyn, and no one seemed to care about the girl behind her. Her first marriage to James Dougherty had already collapsed under the weight of her career. And even as she rose higher in Hollywood, she was carrying the same fear she had since childhood. That people loved the mask, but not the person wearing it. The studios kept her under strict control. They decided what roles she played, how she dressed, even how she spoke. Marilyn wanted serious parts. She wanted to be respected as an actress. But Hollywood only wanted the sexy blonde who could sell tickets. Behind the curtain, Marilyn was trapped, smiling for the cameras, laughing in interviews, but always aware that Norma Jean, the real her, was fading further away. And that's the cruel paradox. The world fell in love with Marilyn Monroe, but the more they loved her, the less they saw Norma Jean.
Hollywood's golden girl.
By the early 1950s, Marilyn Monroe was no longer just another actress trying to make it. She was a phenomenon. Movie studios had finally realized what the public already knew. When Marilyn was on screen, people couldn't look away. Her early breakout came with The Asphalt Jungle in 1950, where she played a small but unforgettable role. Audiences left the theater asking, "Who is that blonde?" The studio executives noticed too. That single role led to All About Eve, where she stood alongside Bette Davis and still managed to shine. Marilyn wasn't just lucky. She studied the camera. She knew how to move, how to catch the light, how to make even the smallest line feel magnetic. While many actresses tried to appear perfect, Marilyn leaned into her flaws, her vulnerability. That was her power. People believed her. By 1953, she was unstoppable. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes put her on the map with the unforgettable number, "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend." That moment, pink dress, gloves, diamonds, became one of the most iconic images in Hollywood history. Soon after came How to Marry a Millionaire, and There's No Business Like Show Business. The public adored her, but behind the glamour, Marilyn felt trapped. She was being typecast as the dumb blonde, a joke character, a decoration for male co-stars. She wanted more. She wanted depth. But the studio didn't care about what Marilyn wanted. They cared about money, and money she brought in. Every Marilyn film was a box office hit. She graced magazine covers, signed endless publicity shots, and her name alone guaranteed packed theaters. Fox Studios knew it, and so did Marilyn. That was the beginning of her quiet rebellion. She would show up late to shoots, sometimes not at all. Directors called her difficult, but in reality, she was tired of being controlled. Tired of men in suits deciding who she was and how she should act. And while the world called her the happiest, most glamorous woman alive, Marilyn was already whispering to friends about how lonely she felt in rooms filled with people. She was the golden girl of Hollywood, yes, but she knew the shine came with chains.
The battle for respect.
By the mid-1950s, Marilyn had had enough. She was tired of being treated like a pretty prop. She wanted to prove she was more than a laugh, more than a blonde wig and a tight dress. So, she did something no one expected. She left Hollywood. In 1954, Marilyn shocked the industry by breaking her contract with 20th Century Fox. It was a daring move. Studios practically owned their stars at the time. Actors didn't walk away from contracts, not unless they wanted to vanish. But Marilyn wasn't bluffing. She packed up, moved to New York, and enrolled in the famed Actors Studio to study under Lee Strasberg, the father of method acting. There, she sat in classrooms with people like Marlon Brando and Paul Newman, practicing raw, emotional acting. And for the first time in years, Marilyn felt like she was being taken seriously. Strasberg treated her like a student, not a poster girl. He told her she had talent, real talent, that she could reach audiences in ways most actors only dreamed of. This was the moment Marilyn began to transform from a movie star into an artist. But Hollywood didn't let go so easily. Fox wanted her back, and they knew she was box office gold. In 1955, after tense negotiations, Marilyn returned, but this time on her own terms. She founded her own company, Marilyn Monroe Productions, making her one of the first women in Hollywood to demand control over her career. And it worked. Her performance in Bus Stop stunned critics. No longer was she the ditzy blonde. She played a vulnerable, raw character who wanted love, but was afraid of it. Audiences saw a different Marilyn, one with depth and pain. The following year, she starred in The Prince and the showgirl opposite Laurence Olivier. While the set was filled with tension, Olivier treated her like a child, dismissing her method acting. Marilyn delivered. And years later, critics admitted her performance carried the film. For Marilyn, this was more than just acting. It was respect. She was fighting for her voice in a world where women were rarely allowed one. And though the struggle was exhausting, she had finally proven to Hollywood that she was not just an image. She was an actress, but with greater respect came greater pressure. And as Marilyn demanded more control, her personal life began to unravel.
Love and broken promises.
If Marilyn Monroe's career was dazzling, her personal life was stormy. Behind every photograph of her smiling on red carpets was a woman desperate for something she never fully had: stability, love, and someone who saw her as more than Marilyn Monroe. Her first marriage was far from Hollywood. At just 16 years old, Norma Jean Baker, not yet Marilyn, married James Dougherty in 1942. The marriage was arranged in part to keep her out of foster care. He was a quiet, ordinary man, a factory worker who later joined the Merchant Marines. But Marilyn wanted more than a housewife's life. When his career took him overseas, she began modeling, and soon after, Hollywood called. The marriage couldn't survive the distance between Norma Jean the wife and Marilyn Monroe the star. By 1946, it was over. Her second marriage was to Joe DiMaggio, one of America's biggest sports legends. The Yankee Clipper and Hollywood's blonde bombshell seemed like a fairy tale couple. But behind closed doors, it was a disaster. Joe wanted a traditional wife, someone private, quiet, loyal to the home. Marilyn, meanwhile, was at the peak of her fame, constantly in the spotlight. The breaking point came in 1954, during the filming of The 7-Year Itch. The famous scene where Marilyn's white dress billowed up over a subway grate became one of the most iconic images in movie history. Fans cheered. Cameras flashed. But Joe DiMaggio was furious. He saw it as public humiliation, his wife showing herself to millions of strangers. That night, the couple had a violent argument in their hotel room. Weeks later, Marilyn filed for divorce, citing mental cruelty. But here's the twist. Even after the marriage ended, Joe never really let go. Years later, after her death, Joe DiMaggio would send roses to her grave 3 times a week for 20 years. He never remarried. And to this day, fans still wonder, was Joe the one man who truly loved her? Then came Arthur Miller, the playwright behind Death of a Salesman. Marilyn thought she had finally found an intellectual equal, a man who saw beyond her beauty. In 1956, they married in a quiet ceremony. At first, it was bliss. She converted to Judaism, tried to live a quieter life, and even spoke of wanting children. But it didn't last. Miller was brilliant but cold. He began writing in his diary about Marilyn's insecurities, even calling her a misfit. When she discovered those words, she was crushed. He was supposed to be the man who understood her, but instead, he saw her flaws as weaknesses. Their marriage collapsed under the weight of miscarriages, depression, and his growing distance. By 1961, they divorced. 3 marriages, 3 heartbreaks. Each time, Marilyn had entered with hope, with the dream of being loved not as Marilyn Monroe, but as Norma Jean. And each time, the dream slipped away. It was during these years that Marilyn's reliance on pills and alcohol grew stronger. To the public, she was the most desired woman alive. To herself, she was a woman who couldn't hold on to love.
The battle within.
By the early 1960s, Marilyn Monroe was a paradox. On screen, she was flawless, glamorous, radiant, unforgettable. Off-screen, she was falling apart. The pressures of fame weighed heavily. Studios demanded perfection. Directors scolded her for being late or unprepared. Without understanding the cocktail of sleeping pills and anti-anxiety medications, she relied on just to function. Insomnia plagued her. She could go days without real rest, then collapse on set, her reputation sinking further with every missed call time. Friends worried constantly. Her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, became a near-daily presence in her life. Some say he cared deeply for her. Others believe he crossed professional boundaries, becoming too close, too controlling. What's clear is that Marilyn was fragile, and she trusted the wrong people too often. Yet even in her darkest hours, she kept working. In 1961, she starred in The Misfits, a film written by Arthur Miller. Ironically, while their marriage was crumbling. It was her last completed film. The set was grueling. Marilyn was ill, exhausted, and emotionally shattered. Clark Gable, her co-star, tried to support her, but he died just days after filming wrapped. Marilyn blamed herself, convinced that her delays and stress had contributed to his decline. The truth was, Hollywood had built her up only to tear her down. Gossip columns painted her as unstable, a diva, a woman spiraling out of control. Few paused to consider why she was unraveling. Behind the scenes, Marilyn had begun mingling with some of the most powerful men in America, President John F. Kennedy and his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy. The rumors of affairs, of pillow talk that blurred into politics, only fueled the storm. Did Marilyn know too much? Was she caught in something bigger than herself? To this day, those questions linger. By 1962, she was fired from the set of Something's Got to Give after repeated absences. But in a twist, she was rehired weeks later. Fox needed her star power too badly to let her go. It seemed like she was about to stage a comeback. But the comeback never came. On August 5, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her Los Angeles home. The official cause: a probable suicide by overdose. She was 36 years old. The world was stunned. Fans cried in the streets. Newspapers across the globe printed her photo, asking the same question. How could the brightest star in Hollywood burn out so soon? And yet, whispers began immediately. The Kennedy brothers, the psychiatrist, the studio, the mafia. Was it really suicide, or was Marilyn silenced because she knew too much? The battle within Marilyn Monroe didn't end with her life. It only transformed into one of the greatest mysteries in Hollywood history.
The star who never died.
When Marilyn Monroe died in 1962, the world mourned. But strangely, her career didn't stop. In fact, it grew even bigger. This is the strange truth about Marilyn. She became more famous dead than alive. Her image exploded everywhere: posters, calendars, books, magazines. Companies knew they could sell anything with her face on it. A beauty ad? Use Marilyn. A perfume line? Use Marilyn. Even decades later, artists like Andy Warhol turned her portrait into some of the most recognizable pop art in history. Why did Marilyn remain so powerful? Because she wasn't just a movie star. She was an idea. She represented beauty, sadness, fame, and tragedy all rolled into one. Every person saw something different in her. For some, she was the ultimate Hollywood goddess. For others, she was the innocent girl destroyed by fame. That mystery kept her alive in the public's imagination. And Hollywood didn't let go. In fact, studios re-released her films again and again. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Some Like It Hot, The 7-Year Itch. They became classics, watched by new generations who weren't even born when Marilyn was alive. By the 1970s, she wasn't just an actress from the past. She was a permanent icon, forever young, forever blonde, forever tragic. But there's something darker here. Marilyn herself once said, "Fame will go by, and so long I've had you." She didn't live to see the way her face would be turned into a global brand. She never saw the millions of dollars made off her name. She was gone, but in a way she never left. Today, more than 60 years later, Marilyn Monroe's Instagram fan pages outnumber those of many modern celebrities. Young people who never saw her in theaters still wear shirts with her face. In death, Marilyn achieved what Hollywood never gave her in life: immortality.
Secrets and shadows.
But with Marilyn's immortality came something else: controversy. Because the official story of her death never sat right with the public. Yes, the autopsy said probable suicide. Yes, empty pill bottles were found by her bed. But too many details didn't add up. Why were there no water glasses nearby, even though swallowing that many pills would have required them? Why were phone records missing from that night? Why did neighbors report strange activity around her home just before she was discovered? And then there were the Kennedys. Marilyn had famously sung "Happy Birthday, Mr. President" to John F. Kennedy just 3 months before her death. That performance, in a skin-tight glittering dress, cemented her reputation as more than just a star. She was the woman closest to the most powerful man in the world. But Marilyn wasn't just linked to John. Rumors swirled about his brother Robert too. Some insiders claimed she was romantically involved with both men. Others whispered that Marilyn kept a red diary filled with political secrets she overheard during those affairs. Secrets about Cuba, the Cold War, even the mafia. So the question became unavoidable. Was Marilyn silenced? Some believed the Kennedys, fearing she would go public with their affairs or their political secrets, cut ties abruptly. Marilyn, devastated, spiraled into depression and overdosed. Others believe it wasn't an accident, that forces in politics or organized crime ensured she wouldn't speak again. Even her closest friends were divided. Some said she had been planning a comeback, too full of hope to take her own life. Others believed her mental health was too fragile, and the tragedy was inevitable. The conspiracy theories grew with every decade. Books, documentaries, investigations, all trying to answer the question, who really killed Marilyn Monroe? And perhaps the most haunting part is this: we may never know. What we do know is this: Marilyn's death turned her into more than an actress. She became a symbol, a warning about the dark side of fame, a reminder that behind every red carpet smile might be a story of loneliness, betrayal, and pain.
Marilyn in modern culture.
Marilyn Monroe may have lived in the 1950s and 60s, but her influence stretches far beyond her own time. She didn't just belong to Hollywood, she shaped it. Think about it. The blonde bombshell archetype didn't exist before Marilyn. Actresses like Madonna, Lady Gaga, and even Kim Kardashian have copied her style, whether it's the platinum hair, the red lipstick, or the famous curves. Marilyn set the standard for what Hollywood thought a superstar should look like. But here's the twist: Marilyn wasn't trying to fit in. She was trying to stand out. She studied acting seriously, worked hard on her craft, and fought against being treated as nothing more than a pretty face. That tension between being a serious actress and being a sex symbol is part of why her story still feels so modern. It's the same fight many stars face today. Her image pops up everywhere in pop culture. Andy Warhol's neon portraits made her face eternal. Elton John wrote "Candle in the Wind" as a tribute to her, before rewriting it years later for Princess Diana. Even now, fashion shows, music videos, and social media influencers constantly recycle her looks. But there's another side to her modern influence. Marilyn has become a symbol for mental health awareness. People see her not just as glamorous, but as a reminder of how fame and pressure can destroy someone from the inside. In that way, she is both a muse and a warning. The truth is, Marilyn Monroe is no longer just a Hollywood actress. She's a cultural language. When you see her face, you instantly think of beauty, fame, tragedy, and mystery all at once. Few people in history carry that much power with just one glance.
The final legacy.
So who was Marilyn Monroe, really? Was she the innocent Norma Jean, the orphan who dreamed of love and security? Was she the superstar who lit up the screen in comedies and romances? Or was she the tragic figure destroyed by the very industry that created her? The answer is that she was all of them. That's why Marilyn continues to fascinate the world. She wasn't simple. She wasn't just a sex symbol or just a victim. She was a complex human being with dreams, flaws, talent, and pain. Her story still feels unfinished because it touches something timeless in us. We all understand the longing to be loved. We all understand the fear of not being enough. Marilyn's story magnifies those feelings onto a global stage, and that's why it never dies. And maybe that's her greatest legacy. Not the scandals, not the conspiracy theories, not even the films, but the fact that she remains real to people, generation after generation. The little girl who once lived in foster homes, who wrote in her diary about wanting to be somebody, ended up becoming one of the most recognized faces in the world. And though her life was cut short at 36, Marilyn Monroe achieved something rare. She became eternal. More than 60 years later, people still ask, what really happened to her? But maybe the better question is, why do we still care so much? The answer is simple. Because Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a star. She was a story. And stories, unlike people, never die. Marilyn Monroe's story doesn't end with her last film, her last interview, or even her last day. It lives on every time her face is printed, every time her laugh is imitated, and every time someone whispers her name. She wanted to be remembered, and she was. But not just as a movie star. She's remembered as a woman who lit up the screen, even while battling shadows behind it. Hollywood has changed since Marilyn's time, but the pressures, the illusions, the struggles for respect, those are still here. And maybe that's why Marilyn's life feels like it could have happened yesterday. When you look at her, you see glamour. But if you look closer, you see courage. You see a woman who never stopped reaching for more, even when the world tried to hold her back. That's why her story still matters. Because Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a Hollywood legend. She was proof that beauty, fame, and success can never hide the human heart underneath. And that's the truth that keeps her alive. Decades later, she's still here. A star that never really faded.